So recommendation number 1 of the report is to increase service levels to meet the demand for adult education. To meet the needs of California's residents and employers, the state must restore dedicated funding to a level adequate to meet the growing demand for these services, minimally to pre-recession levels. Governor Brown's 15-16 budget proposal provides $500 million in Prop 98 funds for the Adult Education Block Grant, an important step towards this goal, but not sufficient to fully address the need. Currently, adult education providers serve a very small fraction of that estimated need. One example is Oakland Unified Adult School in 2008 was serving 16,344 students in the 5 core areas. This year, in current year, they are serving 842 students in those same 5 core program areas. The appropriate funding is necessary to restoring lost capacity in the delivery of adult education programs. Regional consortia need to build adult education delivery capacity based on their needs assessment, including, as appropriate, reopening adult schools and community college satellite campuses that were shuttered during the recession. Both agencies recommend the hiring of additional full-time faculty as well as academic and other counselors to serve these students.
Recommendation number 2 is to improve programming to better prepare students for post-secondary and transition to the workforce. Several words came forward: renew and restore programming, and have it be effective and efficient. There was a lot of redundancy, even with the cuts. There was redundancy in some areas. Now, duplication is important if it's called for, but there was just some redundancy. The recommendation is to strengthen and enhance curricula in the 5 program areas and to offer multiple approaches to make that curricula relevant to students and employers. Some of the examples are contextualization, stackable certificates, multiple approaches, enhance the relevance, and accelerate student progress. Along with that was strengthening professional development for faculty and instructors. We're asking them to work differently and to collaborate in a different way, and that's going to require professional development.
Recommendation 3 is to provide academic, social, and financial support to the adult students. Adult education students need academic and social support to attain their goals. Adult education students may face constraints or economic hardships, making it essential that there are few barriers as possible for assessing adult education services. We need to provide enhanced academic support to our adult students. Many of these adult education students need enhanced academic learning support both inside and outside the classroom in order to be successful. These supports might include tutoring, extra skill practice, and the creation of individual learning plans. We need to also provide enhanced social support for our students. Each region should inventory and develop a system of comprehensive student supports, ensuring that students have the assistance they need to be able to persist and succeed in adult education. These supports can be provided either by the school or by a community partner. Critical supports include items such as transportation from home to school or from the workplace to the school campus, child care, counseling services, health care, including mental health services, and special support for undocumented students and students with disabilities. Vary the course hours to meet the needs of this diverse adult learner population, and partner with community organizations to offer services at convenient time for these students. Adult learners have multiple family and work obligations on their time. Districts must implement varied scheduling, including courses at nights and on weekends, to make it easier for students to attend classes at a time that actually fits their schedules. Finally, we need to reduce the financial burden to assessing adult education services. The fee structures of the California Department of Ed and the Chancellor's Office are currently mandated by separate education code and regulations. For example, the fees for adult education classes are determined by the K-12 providers. Community college providers, on the other hand, are prohibited from charging fees for courses, but require students to pay for related items such as parking, health fees, books, or tools for some of the classes. These fees are different not only among the K-12 providers, but also throughout the community college system. For example, in a K-12 provider, some ESL courses are offered free of charge. In other cases, individual schools may charge up to $35 to attend an ESL course, while vocational or career technical education courses could be as high as $2,000, depending on what the occupational skill they're being trained for. This lack of consistency and alignment between the fee policy creates confusion for our students and even hinders access for the lower income students. The AB 86 Cabinet and Work Group therefore examined these issues involved in developing a more uniform policy for the 5 AB 86 program areas. The two principal options identified were: first, fees could be eliminated entirely for all AB 86 adult education courses, ensuring formal consistency across all programs, reducing confusion and financial barriers to access. The major concern raised to this option is that some programs would then have insufficient funding to meet the demand in their region. Alternatively, programs could continue to have the option to charge fees, but fee levels would need to be consistent across the state and or other criteria established to recognize these fee levels, ensuring that they are fair and reasonable. This option raises a concern that adult education courses might become inaccessible to the lower income students. Given the complexity of the issues around fees, the CDE and the Chancellor's Office recommend that the legislature consider trade-offs and make the determination of whether to eliminate fees or establish guidelines for charging fees, which ensure that there are no financial boundaries for students being able to access adult education services.
So is that your recommendation?
Yes.
Just punt it to the legislature?
Well,
you would like us to tell you what to do?
Well, there's certainly a discrepancy in current ed.
Of course there is. Of course, but that was the role.
So that will take a legislative fix.
Yes, in this particular instance it would. My frustration, quite frankly, with the consortium's final report is that it does not specifically address how both segments can come together and work out all of these issues and make recommendations to this body so that we can change these statutes. It's a huge frustration. Quite frankly, the LAO's report from 2012 indicated those issues that needed to be addressed. And from what I gather, the last year and a half, the consortiums have been kind of a feel-good, here's where I am, here's where you are, and never the twain shall meet. And the purpose of them was to come back to us with a pathway to deliver more services to the people that need them. So it is frustrating that the recommendations are, as far as I'm concerned, not adequate to address going forward. And what I hear is that you want the restoration of resources back to where it was before cuts were made. And we're not going back. We're just not going back. So, we're in another pathway. And so it's very frustrating to hear this, that, as far as I'm concerned, not much progress has been made on this issue. What I hear that the report wants is the restoration. Is that right? And you've given me fees as an issue that you're going to punt to the legislature to solve, among other things. No assessments. You can't come together and determine assessments, placement, other kinds of bigger issues that need to happen to address the needs of our communities. So, I'm sorry, but you can go ahead and finish the other 3 recommendations. But for me, it's not specific enough, task-oriented, that we can do something to move the needle on 5 million people that need help. and not that you provide us with all of the answers, because you've given us some examples of good things that are happening in various consortia. So, can you help us identify best practices so that we can talk about them in a larger scale so other people can learn by them? So, if I sound frustrated, I am. But I'll be back with more questions. Thank you.
So recommendation 4 and recommendation 5 address the SB 173 issues of assessments and accountability. The recommendation was to determine how to align the Common Assessment Initiative that's happening on the Chancellor's side, the TABE, which is used on both the K-12 and the community college side, and CASAS. I would like to talk to you a little bit about the process that went into coming up with these recommendations. They were given to this larger work group to make the recommendations built upon the needs that were identified in the report. They then went out to their constituents and vetted these recommendations, brought them back, and the recommendations were shifted because of what was being vetted. It then went to the Cabinet at the Chancellor's Office and the CDE, and some of these recommendations were then shifted again because of the institutions and the agencies. Fees was an excellent example, and the original recommendation from the work group was that there should not be fees charged to adult education students. When that recommendation went back out and was vetted in the field, it came back to us differently than the work group had put it forward. It came back that the K-12 providers could not survive and would not have capacity if they weren't charging fees. That's how, over the last 5 years, 6 years, that's how they've been able to provide services. And no one's gotten rich in this. It's been able to be able to make the costs of a class just to be able to provide services. So when the Chancellor's Office and the CDE came together to talk about the fees, there were state mandates. There were ed code mandates. There were mandates on the community college side that the basic skills programs, there are no fees, no tuition fees for the basic skills programs. So then, again, that recommendation, that very solid recommendation of, or a very specific recommendation of no fees was shifted, and in the report you see a different recommendation. That happened with the assessment recommendation as well. The initial recommendation was that all adult providers should be using the CASAS, which is currently used by the WIA providers. It went back out and was vetted out in the field, and the field came back and said, we need multiple measures. That's not an adequate assessment to use. That's a placement assessment. It's not a diagnostic assessment. And so the recommendation was we need to put together a common something that can read those common assessments that are being used on the community college side and on the K-12 side. Accountability. The initial recommendation for accountability from the work group is let's build an accountability system that addresses just the needs of our adult education learners, that we identify what those performance outcomes and performance measures, those indicators should be, build the system, and have every K-12 and community college adult education provider use that system for accountability. When that came back, when that was vetted and came back to the two agencies, it said, well, this agency, the community college, has an adequate accountability system. The K-12 CDE has an adequate accountability system. They may be adequate, but they're not aligned and they're not reading the same information. And so the recommendation was evolved to have a common approach, a common accountability approach. And that's to build that interface that reads from both the K-12 and the community college system. When we looked at accountability especially, what was happening statewide is the WIOA is driving accountability measures across multiple state agencies. And these groups, the multiple state agencies, including the CDE, we're coming together to look at indicators, performance indicators, for all of the participants in these state agencies. We cannot create an accountability system in a vacuum or outside of these accountability systems. So there is definitely more work that needs to be done on the accountability system. It needs to be aligned with the new WIOA piece. It needs to be aligned with currently what each agency is collecting.
Excuse me, Deborah. So how long do you think this will take?
You know, Carol, Senator Liu, I think that this is probably a good year of work, of costing out, of building. We've been involved at the Chancellor's Office in building a launch board that reads common metrics from the K-12 to training. And just that initiative has taken 2.5 years at this point, and we're just getting it right now. We have put many dollars and lots of time into that.
But that's the community college system. Have you, okay, so, and the systems don't speak to one another. Even though you've been meeting for 1.5 years and you can't resolve the differences. We can't afford to do a duplicative, offering for the people in the state of California. I mean, as it is, it's expensive. So it's imperative, from my point of view, that we get you folks to talk with one another, or the legislature will just assign one of you to do the job and not the other. I mean, this has been going on for 150 years here. I don't expect it to turn over overnight, but for the last 2.5 years at least, you've been meeting together, identifying the problem, but the resolution to those problems, you may know what needs to happen, but there doesn't seem to be a political will to make it happen. And so, and tell me how to get there.
And I just want to add so that the senator is backed up on at least the point that on the finances end, the whole reason why we're here is because we can't provide that much money unless you can magically come up with a tax measure. We can't provide that money. So for me to hear from you that the solution to this is restoration of the money, I go, what did we task you and pay you to work on, right? I mean, that's the origin of this process. And to hear from you, well, that one of the options is to eliminate fees. Well, then where are you going to get that money? I think where the senator is coming from, or that I want to back up, is that it speaks to a lack of will to solve the problem. And in my mind, the most important thing is that we ensure the continued access to these vital services. And I think the lack of action endangers that access in the long run.
I'd like to also ask a question and hopefully try to find that we did get something for, I think, the $25 million and the 1.5 years that the consortium's met. So as a teacher, as an adult ed teacher, as a community college trustee, as a K-12, and now looking at it from the legislative point of view, it seemed like the mission to both the Department of Education and the community college system was to come together and to see how, working together, we could save the state money by not duplicating services, and two, do a better job in the delivery. After all these consortiums, these 70 consortiums met, is there not anything that you were recommending besides funding more money to make adult education work better?
So you'll be hearing from the 4 consortia who are here, and they'll talk to you about the best practices that have been established. They are working together for the first time. It's unprecedented. Faculty, for example, in the Central Valley, 50 faculty, K-12 and community college faculty and instructors met together over a 2-day period to begin to align curricula so that this is happening. At the local level, we are seeing these kinds of collaborations. They're doing bridge programs. They're doing boot camps in the summer times. They're doing contextualized programs and co-locating classes. So the work is beginning, and I hope that you see that at the local level. I know that you'll see that at the local level when they talk this afternoon.
Did we hear from students in this process? Did we hear from actual students?
We hear
What was their role?
We hear from students. Students were on the, when we expanded the work group, students sat on the work group, and they talked about having transitioned. One of them had transitioned from a K-12 practitioners, K-12 setting to a community college setting, and talked about the advantage of doing that because there was an orientation that happened at the community college as they transitioned. We have gone out to adult schools, we've gone out to the community college programs, we've seen and talked with students there. I'm not certain that what's happening at the consortial level has yet to make it. It's certainly not systematized. It has not been scaled, but indeed students' lives are being affected by the current work that's going on. I think that's the work that we have ahead of us.
Senator Liu, any other
I'll be
questions or
back.
comments?
You know, but I'd like to hear from the next panel. So,
Okay.
so it's-
Well, then let me thank you for your work, and we'll go on to the next panel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite our next panelists, Christian Osema and Keith Nizam from the Department of Finance, to discuss the governor's budget proposal in trailer bill language, and invite back Natasha Collins, who hopefully will provide some thoughts and alternatives as offered by the LAO's office. Good afternoon.
My name is Keith Brown, with the Department of Finance. Previous speakers have done a good job outlining the state's past adult education efforts on how.
Is your microphone on? Thank you.
Sorry, I'll start over. Just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak and provide the administration's adult education proposal. My name is Keith Nizam with the Department of Finance. Previous speakers have done a good job outlining the state's adult education efforts and the current efforts underway as a part of AB 86. And I'll provide an overview of the administration's adult education proposal. As a part of the administration's overall package of workforce development proposals, the reauthorization of the Federal Workforce Investment and Opportunities Act and the work set forth by AB 86 over the past year and a half to address the state's fragmented adult education system, the governor's budget includes $500 million to establish the adult education block grant program. This proposal is intended to foster collaboration and coordination amongst the state's various adult education providers, recognizing varying programmatic expertise, varying resources, and varying regional need for adult education throughout the state. Consortium members consisting of school districts, county offices of education, and community college districts, in collaboration with other education providers within the 70 consortia regions established in AB 86, would be tasked with developing annual regional plans to address regional adult education needs. Plans would need to consider existing regional providers and resources available to those providers, actions that can be taken to improve effectiveness of services, and integration of services and programs to improve transition to other post-secondary instruction or the workforce. In addition, to provide a collaborative framework for regional funding decisions that incorporates the expertise of a variety of regional adult education and workforce development entities, consortium members would be required to establish allocation boards to determine funding distributions to school districts, county office of education, and community college districts, consistent with consortial plans and regional need. Allocation board membership would consist of 7 members representing a member school district or county office of education, a member community college district, another adult education provider, a local workforce investment board member, a county social services employment services office, a county probation department, and a member of the public. Allocation boards would need to consider consortial plans and regional unmet need in determining funding allocations to consortial member school districts, county office of education, and community college districts. In 2015-16, in recognition of the need to provide stability as we transition to this new program, we proposed that school districts and county offices of education that had adult education programs in 2012-13 continue to receive that maintenance of effort amount directly from the block grant. Any remaining funding in 2015-16 would be distributed to consortia by the chancellors of the by the Chancellor of the California Community Colleges and the Superintendent of Public Instruction based on regional need to be distributed by consortia based on allocation board distribution schedules. Beginning in 2016-17, the Chancellor and Superintendent would allocate all funds to consortia based on 3 criteria: the amount of funds received in the prior year, the need for adult education in the region, and the effectiveness of providers in meeting those needs. Consortia fiscal administrators would then distribute funds to school districts, county offices of education, and community college districts pursuant to allocation board schedules. The Chancellor and Superintendent would be tasked with establishing a governance structure as well as producing an annual report that summarizes consortia plans and services, the effectiveness of consortia in addressing regional need, and any findings and recommendations they may have to improve adult education in the state. In developing this proposal, we worked to be responsive to the comments, concerns, and feedback we heard from those interested in adult education. We have tried to address much of the feedback we received, including by supporting stability for existing providers, providing flexibility at the local level, clarifying roles within the consortia, and continuing to foster collaboration amongst providers to improve student outcomes. We understand that there are some ongoing concerns, and we intend to continue to listen and respond, recognizing the goals and the framework of the governor's proposal as this process moves forward. This concludes my overview, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Were we going to hear from all 3? I'm sorry. I've got some now, since we can talk about the governance. My concern is about the governance model of these dollars. Can you walk us through the governance model through the new local allocation board? How exactly will that work?
So the school district, county office of education, and community college district consortium members would select an allocation board consisting of the 7 members that I mentioned. Those 7 allocation board members that are part of the consortia would make allocation decisions consistent with the consortia plans and regional need. So what the idea behind this proposal, or this component of the proposal, is to provide more of a collaborative framework for regional funding decisions. And not just recognizing that there's more than just school district and community college district providers. There are also providers in the workforce investment board realm. There's social service departments that provide adult education. There's also probation departments that also provide levels of adult education. So the concept is that we want to integrate and collaborate as much of this expertise that exists in each of the regions to inform the decisions that are made, the funding decisions that are made.
So this board will actually make the funding decisions?
Consistent with the consortia plans that are approved by the school districts and community college districts.
This board will divide up the dollars?
That's correct.
So who is this board accountable to?
So this board is accountable to the consortium members within the 70 regions.
What's the recourse?
If a consortia does not approve of the decisions that are being made by the allocation board, that's something they can appoint different allocation board members if that's their prerogative. There's also accountability frameworks and governance structure that we're asking the superintendent and the chancellor's office to implement. So there's also, there'd be an accountability structure there. There'd be annual reporting requirements, where those funds are being spent, what types of services are being provided, whether or not the services that are being provided are effective, whether outcomes are being improved. So this allocation board, which is part of each of the consortia, would be held accountable in the same way that the consortium members would be.
So we're creating another governing body. Who would be the lead agency? Would the consortia get the dollars, and then where would they pass through? Where would the dollars land, and then end up at their ultimate service point?
So each of the consortia's, school districts, county office of education, and community college districts would appoint a fiscal administrator that would be one of the members of the consortia. So one of the school districts, community college districts, or county office of education. The funding allocations that the chancellor's office and the superintendent make to each of the regions would go to that fiscal administrator. That fiscal administrator would distribute the funds based on the allocation board's direction.
And who runs the allocation board? Do they hire an executive director? How does the model work? How does work get done?
They're essentially part of the consortia. The school district and community college district members, or allocation board members, are part of the consortias. So they are like an advisory committee, essentially, so advisory board as a part of the consortia.
So there's an advisory board, and then there's the consortia. Walk me through that.
So consortias would consist of all of the school districts, county office of education, and community college districts that want to participate in that region's adult education program. In order to receive any of the adult education block grant funding, you would need to be a member of the consortia. And then the consortia appoints an allocation board to bring in additional expertise from different providers in the region outside of the traditional school districts and community college districts.